Fans had been asking for more X-Wing books since the release of its 9th volume, Starfighters of Adumar, in 1999, when Aaron Allston's editor at Del Rey, Shelley Shapiro, asked if he'd be interested in writing a 10th novel in early 2010. Allston was surprised but happily accepted. X-Wing Mercy Kill was released in August of 2012 and serves as a decades-later sequel to the 3 Wraith Squadron books. Set after the end of the Fate of the Jedi series, it deals with one of the series' loose ends, the fallout around the Lesserson conspiracy, which is what that pro-imperial conspiracy headed by Senator Treen came to be called. Back in 2012, I hadn't read any of the Fate of the Jedi series, but when they announced that Aaron Allston was going to be writing a new Wraith Squadron book, I was like, that's it, I'm gonna read it. And I think in its favor, Mercy Kill does not require you to have read the Fate of the Jedi series, so a brief summary. Following the end of the Second Galactic Civil War, Wraith Squadron was disbanded, and all the members forcibly retired. But Face Loran contacts Voort, Piggy, Sabingring about one final job: discovering if General Stavin Thaal is a traitor and part of the pro-imperial Lesserson conspiracy that ran rampant during the events of the Fate of the Jedi series. Voort joins Wraiths, old and new, and they will tackle any task and assume any role to find out the truth about Stavin Thaal. So after The Legacy of the Force and the Fate of the Jedi series, where I felt like the plot summaries got increasingly complicated as the series progressed, Mercy Kill's pretty simple. Voort, who was formerly known as Piggy, retired at the end of the Yuuzhan Vong conflict for reasons that are revealed during the book. He now works as a mathematics professor. He doesn't really enjoy his job, but he does it. And when Face Loran shows up out of nowhere and says, hey, I'm trying to rebuild Wraith Squadron for this one assignment that we've been given from Galactic Alliance Security, Voort is reluctantly intrigued and decides to go along with it. The group is led by Bindi Drayson and includes new members like Trey, their electronics guy, and Scut, who is their biochemist and is a Yuuzhan Vong shamed one, as well as the offspring of original Wraiths like Miri Antilles, daughter of Wedge, or Jesmyn Tainer, daughter of Kel and Tyria. The Wraiths quickly uncover evidence that Stavin Thaal is not on the up and up and that he is definitely stealing stuff, but in the process they run across the existence of another Wraith Squadron, and things end badly for Bindi Drayson during that encounter. Voort at that point chooses to take command of both Wraith Squadrons. He's now the leader, and we go into the home stretch of proving that Stavin Thaal is a traitor, with many hijinks along the way. The past Wraith Squadron books were definitely ensemble tales, where characters would come to prominence in different books. Mercy Kill takes a slightly different approach, in that we do spend time with different members of Wraith Squadron, but it's really focused heavily on Piggy's emotional journey. In fact, opening the book and starting it and seeing that he's now going by Voort and that he doesn't even want Face to call him Piggy anymore hurt me. Originally, when I started reading Wraith Squadron, I was like, I don't know how I feel about calling a Gamorrean Piggy. But by the time you get to the end of Solo Command, you're like, oh, Piggy, I love him. That's the perfect nickname for him, and he doesn't mind it at all. So to see him completely turning his back on his Wraith Squadron past is sad, to see how he's had to cope with all this grief and loss on his own. Because Mercy Kill is about Piggy coming to terms with what he's lost in the past, Piggy realizing that he can be a leader, he can take charge, and also Piggy coming to terms with some of his very understandable prejudices along the way. We get a few flashback moments throughout the novel. The first is a mission that the Wraiths undertake when they were an intelligence group, long before the truce between the New Republic and the Empire. And we just sort of see their dynamic, how they're able to accomplish things but still have fun. And Piggy in that scene is undercover with a Gamorrean dance troupe, which is something that the later Voort would never have agreed to do. We also get a flashback set around the time of Timothy Zahn's Vision of the Future, where we see that one of Piggy's closest friends, Shala Nelprin, wants to retire now that the conflict between the Empire and the New Republic is over. That she's ready to move on, even if Piggy and his best friend Runt are still happy remaining with Wraith Squadron. And then finally, we have the flashback that gives Mercy Kill its title, which is the tragic death of Runt during the very tail end of the Yuuzhan invasion. The Wraiths are sent to get important information about this new biotechnology that the Yuuzhan have come up with. And in the process, Runt is fatally wounded. He knows he won't be able to make it out alive. He's been poisoned by an amphistaff. And so Piggy has to kill his best friend to make sure that the information is not leaked and that he's able to succeed with the mission. This is what causes Piggy to leave Wraith Squadron, to quit. The war is almost done, but that's it. The very act of having to kill his best friend for information that, yes, is important, but is it really going to change the course of the war at this point when the Yuuzhan are on the back foot? It's upsetting to him, and it makes him leave this group of close friends that he's come to work so much with. And it really shows how he's not able to work through his grief. And when we meet back up with him in the beginning of Mercy Kill, that he's not been able to move past Runt's death. And this is so heartbreaking to me because I love Piggy. I want the best for Piggy. And he was never able to talk with anyone about this, to work through his issues until decades later, which is so sad. And that understandably leads to Piggy having pretty strong prejudice against the Yuuzhan, which is something that I was very interested in Allston bringing up here because we don't see a lot of it in the post-New Jedi Order books, and I really think it fits, and we should have. We see the Bothans continuing to carry out their vendetta against Yuuzhan and Yuuzhan tech, but that's about it. So when we see Piggy's interactions with Scut, they feel very realistic to me, that someone who lived through those traumatic 5 years would not be trusting or welcoming to a Yuuzhan individual, even one like Scut, who was a child during that, who was a shamed one, who wasn't part of the Yuuzhan ruling class or decision makers in any way. But in Piggy's mind, his best friend was killed by the Yuuzhan. The Yuuzhan betrayed the galaxy and caused innumerable suffering and death. And his first reaction to seeing a member of the Yuuzhan on the Wraith Squadron team is understandably negative. My only thought here is that Piggy's the only one that has an issue with Scut, and Piggy obviously has to work through his issues with Scut. And I feel like this is something where maybe I would have seen other older Wraiths also have the same issue. Presumably not Bindi Drayson since she recruited Scut, but maybe Charlotte once he shows up. And maybe it would have felt even more realistic to me if other members of Wraith Squadron also had an issue with Scut, but the novel is focused on Piggy, and so he's the only one. In addition to Piggy, though, we do have some other older Wraiths who show up in the story. Obviously, Face Loran is the one that recruits Piggy, who recruited Bindi Drayson and Charlotte for their 2 different teams. He's running a little bit of interference, and there is a cliffhanger middle section where it looks as though Face is killed in a speeder explosion. Obviously, Allston's not afraid of killing off characters, as what happens with Bindi Drayson, but I didn't buy that Face was dead here because it felt a little too sneaky to me, especially when we later learn that his family is missing. I was like, oh yeah, Face got out and he's gonna pop back up at the end. Bindi Drayson and Charlotte were both Wraiths who appeared in the Enemy Lines duology during the New Jedi Order series, so they're not OG Wraiths in the same way that Face and Piggy are. Charlotte's a bit of a goofster. That's pretty much it. And Bindi's plotline basically comes down to the fact that she's not willing to take risks with others because she's concerned about losing the young members of Wraith Squadron. She doesn't know what she'd say to their families if she lost them. And that ends up being her fatal flaw in a way that directly leads to her death. That she wasn't able to think strategic, she was too focused on protecting the other race, and so she agreed to part of the mission that was not part of her skill set and led to her being, again, fatally shot. This, of course, leads to Piggy realizing that he needs to take command of Wraith Squadron, that Bindi wasn't willing to do whatever it takes to uncover if Thaal was a traitor or not, and that's what the mission means, that Charlotte probably wasn't going to be the best choice for leading the combined Wraith Squadrons, and Piggy in the end was. Both of the Wraith Squadrons end up being an amalgamation of completely new characters, and then characters who are descendants of previous Wraith Squadron people. So, like I mentioned, we have Jesmyn Taynor, who is the daughter of Tyria Sarkin Taynor and Kel Taynor. Tyria is now a Jedi, her brother Doran is a Jedi. Jesmyn, though, trained with the Antaran Rangers, apparently spent a lot of her life with family members on Toprawa, and while she has Force abilities, she's not a Jedi per se. Miri Antilles, Wedge and Ayala's youngest daughter, is primarily a professional gambler, but she has worked with Galactic Alliance security in the past, and she has a lot of different looks in this book. Miri is also dealing with just the legacy of being an Antilles, where your father is one of the most famous military figures and pilots of all time. Your sister's a pretty darn good pilot too, and like, how do you live up to that? How do you deal with the fact that your last name is one of the most famous last names in the galaxy? But at the same time, we see that she does have a very good relationship with her father. When the Wraiths are in a very tight spot, she's able to call for help, and Wedge himself comes to bail them out. And the second Wraith Squadron, led by Charlotte, has another descendant character as well. This is Shala Nelprin's nephew, Ran, who is a very good shot. This got me fairly hyped up, thinking that we were going to see Shala again, and we don't, other than that flashback scene. She's not in the book at all. But I did like Allston pulling these, like, second-gen characters in, who have some similarities to their famous parents, but are also unique characters in their own right. And then some of the other Wraiths, like I said, are completely new. We have Termin, who is a Claudite actor. Really love that, because other than Zam Wessel, we haven't seen a lot of Claudites running around, and they are shapeshifters, so that's pretty cool. My favorite scene with Termin was when the other race tried to drug him unconscious, not realizing he was from Wraith Group number 1, and because he's a Claudite, it affected him very strangely, and he was just like monologuing the whole time. Trey is their big guy, electronics guy, almost seeming to fill the Kel Taynor role here. And he got some nice quips in there as well. There's a Wookiee. There's another guy who's constantly flirting with Miri. Unfortunately, because they weren't the Wraith group number 1 that we spent the most time with, I did not retain their names as well as the others. And on the baddie front, we have our intrepid Wraiths trying to figure out if General Stavin Thaal was part of the Lesserson conspiracy, that the head of Galactic Alliance Security reached out to Face, said, I want you to do this on the DL, and so that's why they're not officially sanctioned, trying to figure out what he's up to. Stavin Thaal was apparently an Imperial. He was from Carida. Yikes. And he joined the New Republic back during the, war with the Empire stage. During the Yuuzhan invasion, he and a group were on one of the Coruscant system worlds attacking the Yuuzhan. They called themselves the Pop Dogs after a prairie dog thing that was from Carida that they're trying to rehome on Vandor 3. And he very much was part of the Lesserson conspiracy. He killed at least one member of the conspiracy in Ascension when it started to fall apart. But besides that, he's just an all-around bad guy. He's been stealing from the Galactic Alliance for years, selling stuff on the black market. He's got this escape plan where he's gonna change his identity, be a completely new person, and never get caught. Well, not if the Wraiths have anything to say about it. I like the revelation that not all the Pop Dogs were bad, that some of them were just following their leader and didn't know what he was all up to. But I do have some issues with Thaal's character, and we'll hit on that in the issues section. So not an issue, I just loved the general level of hijinks going on in Mercy Kill. There's all these different plans. There's basically Laura's King of the Droids scheme where they're using droids to spy on Thaal. They're impersonating people, they're here, they're there, they're stealing stuff, they're being pirates, they're pretending to be Imperials. That was an awful lot of fun. But on the more issue side, I did find their hijinks confusing at times. Some of that was intentional because obviously for the first half, Piggy is not leading the group. Bindi Dracid is in charge. She is telling them what they're doing, but she's just telling them as they come to it. So these things come as a surprise to Piggy, and they come as a surprise to the reader as well. But how I felt like that read was that I'm like, cool, I'm along for the ride, but I have no idea where we're going. I knew their general aim was to uncover what Thaal is up to, but the way in which they undertook that did not always make a lot of sense to me, because it's they're bouncing from hijink to hijink to hijink. And for a fair bit of the book, I was like, I do not know how this all works together. But I think my biggest two issues with Mercy Kill, as fun as it was that first, the new Wraiths just aren't particularly memorable or don't feel like individuals in the same way that the OG Wraiths in the 3 Wraith Squadron books do. I think part of this may be the fact that Mercy Kill is just one book here, and in the case of the Wraith Squadron trio, we get characters like Lara and Min whose stories are unfolding across all 3 books and who don't come to a climax until Solo Command. With Mercy Kill, I felt like what happened with Piggy was very well done and felt very effective. But maybe because there was so much emphasis on Piggy, a lot of the other Wraiths just felt like types to me. That Trey is the big guy, the electronics guy, that Jasmine is the tracker girl. We have the Wookiee, who's a Wookiee. We have the flirty one. We have the sniper one. We have the over-the-top actor one. But they didn't really cohere into distinctive characters for me in the same way that the Wraiths did in Allston's original novels. Maybe if we had had more of this Wraith Squadron 2.0, more books following after Mercy Kill, they would have started to come into their own. But I felt like the development of the Wraiths apart from Piggy was one of Mercy Kill's weaker points. And I think its weakest is the villain here. Stavin Thaal just can't hold up to Zinj. He can't even hold up to the 2-timing New Republic intelligence guy that was the baddie in Starfighters of Adjumar. He came across as menacing in Conviction and Ascension, but I didn't get that same sense of menace here in Mercy Kill. He's not a large ham like Zinj, and he's smart, but he's not smart enough. So while I could see why the Wraiths are trying to take him down, he didn't feel like a particular threat to them in any way, which definitely contributed to him being a weaker villain in my eyes. Because I think in the end, what motivates Thaal is greed. He wants wealth, he wants recognition, and that just wasn't as compelling to me for a villain as other villains in the X-Wing series have been. So, in short, Mercy Kill is a fun return to the X-Wing series. We have hijinks and schemes galore, and a really deep look into Piggy's character, how he's changed over the course of these books, and how he's coming back into his own by the end of Mercy Kill. Realizing that, yes, he suffered grief, he suffered loss, but he still has a life to live, and he can still have fun along the way. Unfortunately, most of the other Wraiths didn't really grab me the same way that Piggy's story did, and I wish that the villain had been a little better here, because I think that having General Thaal be the villain is Mercy Kill's weakest point, because he's just not interesting. But still, Mercy Kill was a fun return to form, setting up future Wraith Squadron adventures, even if they didn't happen because of the Disney buyout and because of Aaron Allston's sad early death. So next time I'm going to be reading another short story that appeared in Star Wars Insider magazine, this one about Jaina and Jag's honeymoon, Getaway by Christy Golden. Yub yub, Commander.